Gotta go, gotta see things, see new places and brand new things. Gotta go places and do things, maybe to forget.
Hi guys, my name is Christian Wilkinson and I'm a professional photographer and image retoucher. At the moment I work for SCS in the photo editing department. We're all in lockdown at the moment, but SCS have been fantastic with their employees. Now having this spare time on my hands has given me a chance to think about a way that I can copy all my old negatives and digitize them. And I've figured out a very novel way of doing it using an old SLR film camera. Okay, so I'm going to show you guys now how to convert these old cameras into a negative copying machine. Now, to do this, we're going to need some basic sort of tools and equipment. We're going to need an iPad or some sort of Android tablet. This is going to provide the light source, okay? We're also going to need our very own camera. Now, I'm using a professional camera here with macro extension tubes, but if you don't have a professional SLR camera, the methods that I'm using also apply to people wanting to use iPhones or Android phones, as long as you've got a very good quality camera on there, which, let's face it, most of us do have these days. The only thing is that you will need to buy a macro or a close-up lens for it. Now these can be bought cheaply off eBay. Finally, we're going to need an old SLR film camera. This is an old Russian one. The Russians made millions of these and they can be bought for literally just a couple of pounds off eBay. But it may be that your grandparents have one lying around the attic and they might be able to lend you one. Now, we're going to need to dismantle the camera, but the only part of the camera that really needs to work is the wind-on mechanism in here. And I'll show you guys why in a minute. Now, proof is in the pudding with any project like this. So I'm going to show you guys now a quick slideshow with some of the pictures that I've previously converted. So now that's the introduction out of the way, I'm going to show you guys now how to convert your old SLR film camera into your very own negative copier. So this is the basic kind of equipment that you're going to need to get this project up and running. First of all, you need an old film camera. This is a 35mm Zenit one. So you're going to need a Sharpie pen, ruler, a sharp knife, some scissors, a fine microfiber cleaning cloth. I've got some electrical tape and some duct tape, and some card. I went for black. This card is 2mm thick, which I've found to be perfect. This is just a little microfiber cleaner. Obviously then you're going to need some negatives. Now it's really crucial when you do this that you have maybe a roll of unexposed film or film that's basically you're prepared to sort of get ruined, because you're going to need to cut a few little bits off and in the process you are going to ruin the film. So this is just unexposed film here, okay, and you're going to need to cut a strip of approximately 12 to 13 centimeters. Okay, so you're going to need to cut that. That's one of your first jobs. This is a roll of negatives that I exposed earlier. I've already copied these earlier on, and I'm going to use this as a sort of demonstration. This project really is best suited to people that have got lots of negatives that you've rolled up that you haven't cut. That's the real sort of novelty about this. This is a fast way to get those negatives copied. Anybody that's tried doing any negative copying in the past will know that it's a very slow process. And I've managed to literally photograph thousands of negatives in the last couple of days. Okay, so the first thing you're going to need to do is to remove the back plate from the camera. Okay, so here's the camera, and you just take the back, and okay, and if you pull on it hard enough, that will come off. Okay, we don't need that anymore for the rest of this project. Okay, unfortunately this camera is one that I've already fixed up for copying, but when you've done that, the next thing you're going to need to do is look inside here, and you will see that there's a black piece of fabric here. You need to get a sharp knife and you need to get rid of it. Just keep pulling at it, remove it. Okay, that needs to be gone. And then when you've done that, you need to make sure that your shutter is completely stuck up, so it's not getting in the way. All right, so just wedge it up, and if there's anything in there that's kind of blocking your line of sight, try to remove it. Okay, so what you need is a clear line of sight. Okay, so once you've removed the shutter curtain and anything inside here, the next thing you need to do is make your own back cover. So using the black card, you just cut a strip out, okay? And that's going to sit there. Alright, really quite easy to make. The measurements for this particular camera, I've gone for 140 millimeters in length, 55 millimeters wide, and this card is about 2 millimeters thick. So it just sits perfectly flush inside there, like that. Okay, and then obviously you need to cut out a rectangle here because that's where the negatives are going to be seated. Okay, so what's going to happen basically, we're going to load our negatives into here, use the wind on mechanism to move on each frame, take a shot of it, and that's going to be the system that we use. Okay. While I was taking pictures earlier, I noticed that the negatives kept sort of moving up and down a little bit. So what I did was I took my black card and I cut a very thin strip of about 2 or 3 mil. And if you just place it there and stick it down, there's one there and one there. It just provides a runner, which is going to stop these negatives moving up and down. Okay, and all I did with that, like I said, just took a strip of card, about 2 or 3 mil, okay, and then just I've super glued it to that. All right, so just 2 little strips there, and that's really going to help keep the negatives seated properly. You're ready to move on to the next part, which is basically just to create a nice soft kind of housing in this section here, because that's where your negatives are going to be seated as they go through the camera. Okay, they're going to go like this, so you don't want anything rubbing or scratching in here. So all we're going to do now, okay, is I'll just move that out of the way. You're going to take your microfiber cleaning cloth and you want to cut a width of I think it was 4 centimeters. 4 centimeters. Okay. The length at this stage doesn't really matter. We'll come back to that in a minute. Probably about 10 centimeters will be more than enough. There we are. Alright. Now when you do this, you're probably going to notice that the edges kind of fray a little bit, which isn't a big deal, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some electrical tape just to cover up the frayed edges. So now we have this strip here. We're going to put that inside the camera. I'm not going to glue it down permanently because, like I just said, this is something that you're probably going to want to replace every now and again. Okay, and the good thing about putting this electrical tape here is it sort of gives it a little bit of rigidity, which it didn't really have before. Alright, now what we want to do is take it sort of to the edge of here without going over the edge, obviously. I'm just going to get rid of that little bit there. Okay, so yeah, we need to tape it as close to this edge as we can really get it. Now I would use something stronger for this. Now I'm just going to take this and tape it onto here, like that. That's fine. Okay, so you see that, and I really don't mind about this excess here. because the negatives might spill over, so I'm quite happy with that. So what's going to happen now is when your negatives are sat inside here, they've got a nice kind of soft cushion, okay, as they go through the system, and they're not touching any of the metal, they're not scraping against anything. And you can also do the same on this one if you like. If you really feel it's necessary, you could put some microfiber here. I actually found one of these, okay, it's called a tiny pad, which I got from the range. All it is like a little, it's a mobile phone sort of cleaning pad, alright, and that's it's got its own sticky tape on the back. But if I didn't have one of them, I'd just take another strip of this and put it here, and that's just going to provide an extra bit of sort of cushion as it goes through, okay. So now that goes there. Okay, so once this side is taken care of, we need to take care of this side. So to do that, we're going to need to get an old piece of negative, okay, like this. This is an old unexposed bit of film, and what you want to do is sort of take it across here and sort of cut it like that, which is about 10 centimeters, okay. Better to do it a little bit longer. We can always cut it down if it turns out to be too long, okay. And then what we need to do is we need to sort of fold this edge here like this, and this is just going to help it sort of hold on, and we need to attach it to this spool here. So I've already folded it over. I'm going to put it in there. This is quite fiddly, but by doing this you're going to save yourselves a lot of time later on. Make sure that it sits in the spool socket there, and then you want to tape it. Now, give you guys a tip, make sure to have lots of little bits of tape pre-cut, because these negatives, they're really lively to handle, so you don't want to be cutting bits of tape while you're handling the negatives. So I'm going to tape it that side, okay, and I'm also going to tape it on the other side, because this needs to be really secure. Right, and then what will happen is that should wind on nicely now, okay. Just make sure that that's nice and secure, because what we're going to do next later on is we're going to get our exposed negative, and we're basically going to tape it onto this, alright, and that means that we're not messing around attaching it to this side here, so that's really going to save a lot of time. I've already photographed thousands of negatives like this, and believe me, this method really is the most efficient way of doing it. So while we're here, what you want to do is take some more tape, okay, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to place some of this tape on here, one either side, not on the actual spool, okay, just inside of the spool, one there and one this side. Make sure that more of this tape goes on this negative than's actually peering out over the edge. You only want to say 4 or 5 mil either side, because that's going to hold the negatives when we come to doing our copies. They'll sit in there like that, okay. Alright, I'll just sort of give you a demo, and then we're going to get it lined up. We're going to take our first shot, okay, and then move it on, okay, and then very quickly we can copy an entire roll of film. Alright, then when you've finished doing your negatives, this should just peel off quite easily, okay, and hopefully if you've done it right, that's it. It should be still on here, ready for the next roll of negatives to go on. Another little tip that I'm going to give you as well, when you've done that, I would take this knife and just pierce, just very carefully in here. Okay, put a pierce, maybe just a couple of points, really little points. And what they are is focusing points, so that when you're getting set up, that should allow the light to come through and give you something to focus on. And you can even take a Sharpie pen and maybe even just put a cross like that. So when you come to get set up, you can use that as a guide to focusing. Otherwise you don't have any image there to focus on. so once this section's taken care of here, the next thing that I need to do is put my own back cover back on, the one which we made earlier from card. Okay, so I'm just going to put that out of the way there. Now what I've done here is I've just put a little bit of tape across there, and what I've done here is I'm going to make a sort of latch system using an old piece of negative here. Alright, so you can see I've just gaffer taped that on. Okay, so it's nice and strong, and that's going to help provide the sort of latch system, if you like. Now when we put this on, first of all, make sure to get it lined up perfectly where it needs to be here, okay? And the best way to do that is to get it roughly in place, turn the camera over, okay, holding it flush, and just make sure that when you look straight down there, that you cannot see the card, because obviously that means it's masking the negative, and that's what we don't want. Alright, so once it's where you need it to be, just use your electrical tape just to sort of temporarily secure it in place. The good thing about using electrical tape is that it's very forgiving, but it's quite strong, so it will hold that flush, but I can easily remove it after. And then obviously just move that out of the way. Okay, so now what I need to do is just tape the other side of this to the other side of the camera. Now it needs to be quite secure, so like I said, using lots of gaffer tape. There we have our new back cover. I just wanted to talk about a couple of little modifications that I made. The white gaffer tape was really looking unsightly, so what I did was I used some black electrical tape. So I've just tidied things up a little bit. I've done the same on the back. Okay, I didn't like the fact that there was so much card, which was obviously, that can leave bits of dust and tiny little bits. Okay, so I've done the same here on the inside. Okay, so what I've used is black electrical tape, so that basically there's no card showing, because obviously the card can produce dust. And I've just put myself a little sort of hinge on here, again using the microfiber cloth. Okay, and all that's going to do really is just help tidy everything up. So it's quite straightforward to do. It's more of an aesthetic thing. Just think that the whole thing looks better, but also now this cardboard, it's a lot more rigid, and it's not going to, it's not going to need replacing as much as it would have been had I not put the tape on. So what I'm going to show you guys next is exactly how to load the film. So what we're going to do is take this part here, make sure the tape's parted, okay. Alright, we'll just put that there. Then we take our negative, okay, and we make sure that the shiny side is away from us and that the matte side is facing towards us. It doesn't really matter if your negative's upside down at this stage, because we can always turn it around later on using Bridge or Photoshop. Then we stick it together like that, okay. There we have it. Make sure it's nice and firm. Alright, so we have a connection now. Now we need to put a little bit of tension on this. I'm only really touching the edges here. Okay, these negatives, they're like coiled up strings. Okay, so trying not to touch it. Like I said, some of these negatives here that I've got, they haven't seen the light of day for absolutely years. So I want them to remain as pristine as I can. Make sure that the tape's firm down there. Then we shut the back up, okay. We use this tape here, which is overhanging as a sort of latch. Alright, so there it is, there it's in place. We can use this to focus, or we can just move it on now. You can see it moving. We can focus on our image here. So what we're going to do next is set this up. We'll take a picture of the negative, move it on, take a picture, and we should be able to get this entire roll of film done in a matter of seconds. Now that I've got my old SLR film camera loaded with the negatives inside, I'm going to show you guys the kind of setup. So you're going to need a good solid sort of desktop here to work from. Now we'll start off with the light source. Make sure if you're using an iPad or a tablet that the brightness is set on maximum, and make sure it's not going to go to sleep. Okay, so you want it to be on all the time, obviously plug it into the charger, because this will take up a lot of battery. So your brightness should be on the highest possible setting. Now you'll notice that this has like a bezel around it, which means that I'm going to have to raise this camera a little bit, okay? So I'm going to use a book for that, okay? And the other thing is, don't have your camera too close to the screen, okay? Because if you do, you'll be shooting the pixels of the screen. And what I did was, I just went onto Safari and I just googled like plain white background image. Alright, so get yourself a plain white background image like that, okay? You can Google plain white background image. So now I need to raise this camera, okay? Now I'm going to use this book here, and I've managed to find two books that are basically the same sort of height. So I'm going to put that underneath my camera, put it flush, okay? And then I'm going to put that there. So the camera's now raised so that this black bevel isn't an issue. And earlier on, I marked out exactly where I want this camera to be. And like I said, it's about 4 inches away from that screen. This card here, what I realized was earlier on was that when this camera is placed in front of that one, the lens was kind of dropping down at the front, because it's got so much weight on the front. It was front heavy, so all I've done there is I've just got some pieces of card and I've just sort of raised it to get it to be exactly the same level as where my negatives are in here. Okay guys, so once you've got everything in place, you're going to need to focus your image. Now if you remember earlier, I showed you that I put some little holes in the negative and a big cross, and the idea was that that was going to help me get everything into focus. So when you're focusing your camera, open up your aperture to like f2.8 or f1.8. That way, if it's slightly out of focus, it's going to be immediately apparent, okay? So there we go, everything's in focus there. Once you've got it in focus, lock your lens down. So I'm going to go to about f13 here, okay? And now I'm going to move on the frame to the next frame. So the first one here was that one. I'm just going to skip that one because that one actually had some tape on it. Okay, so we'll get our first frame lined up. Now, the next thing you want to do is turn out your lights, okay? But before you turn out your lights, take your a bag or some black fabric and just place it over your lenses like that. Okay, that's just going to stop any light that might be bouncing around and getting inside to that negative. So first I'm just going to switch that off. Now I'm going to close the curtains. So you can see now everything's nice and dark, and I'm just going to show you guys in real time how quickly I can take this roll of film. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my camera. Now, if it was just an individual shot or a couple of shots, I put it on self timer for 2 seconds, okay? So the camera now is timing down, and obviously I wasn't touching the camera when that shot was taken. Okay, but I want to show you guys a really quick, easy way to rattle through this roll of negatives now. So if you go to your menu, okay, you can use the interval timer, set the interval to take one shot every 6 seconds. Okay, so there's our first shot, and now I'm just going to wind on the film like this, and every 6 seconds the camera's going to take a shot, which means that I can very quickly get through this roll of negatives. And there's no other method that I know of that allows you to get so many pictures. And obviously I'm using the full sensor here, full 24 megapixel sensor. Obviously if I had a full frame camera, I'd be using it on the maximum quality. Okay, so this is real time. Alright, going through these negs. Now I could set the intervalometer to say maybe do 3 or 4 seconds, but I've just decided that sort of 6 seconds just is about right. Now it may be that you don't want to do the entire roll, in which case you might be better just using the 2-second timer. So I'm going to skip that frame there. Okay, I set it to take an infinite amount of pictures, so this is just going to keep going. Okay, the only problem with this method is that if you overwind it, it's very difficult to get your film back. So if anything, try to sort of underwind it a little bit, if you see what I mean. There we go. So by doing it in this method, you could do a roll of 36 exposures in literally just sort of 2 or 3 minutes. No time at all, really. Okay, just going to keep going. And what I'll do is, once these are finished, I'll remove the negatives. So taking the negatives out, it's just exactly the same process in reverse, okay? Pretty straightforward. And then you're primed and ready to do your next roll. As I mentioned earlier, make sure that you secure your camera, okay? This camera here, make sure that it's sort of not moving at all. And when you place your old film camera on the book, make sure to sort of mark it out so that you know exactly where it's going to go next time. Okay, and that's the end of the roll there. You can see the white screen behind it. What I always do, I just make sure that that line is perfectly sharp. That tells me that the camera hasn't moved as I've been doing this. So I'm just going to press OK. So that's stopped now, okay? That's not going to take any more pictures. So I'm really happy with that. So what I'm going to do next is I'll show you guys how to get these images from raw format to looking really nice and obviously no longer negative. So I'll use Bridge to do that. Okay guys, so once we've taken our images, I'm going to open them up in Bridge, okay? So just find my folder here. Alright, I want to show you the images which I just shot. So here they are, okay? So what we're going to do is get our first image set up and then we're going to create a preset so that we don't have to do the same thing over and over again. So we'll start with this one. I'm going to right click on the image, okay, and I'm going to open it in Camera Raw. Okay, now in order to get this image from negative to positive, we have to go to the curve, okay, and we'll click on the one that says point. Okay, so we're on the tone curve option here, and you see here we have little points. Make sure that you're on point, not parametric. So we'll take these little points here, start with the one that's on the top right. You see that it's going across diagonally, and what we're going to do is make this diagonal go the other direction, okay, and that's going to invert the image. Bring it down like that, okay, then the same on the other side. Make sure you don't create an extra point. So that's fine. You see now the image, even though it looks very cyan, you can see that it's no longer a negative but it's a positive image. Then we come into to our treatment. Now obviously we need to remove this sort of cyan look. You can maybe experiment here. Sometimes I try auto. That's done a reasonably good job. It's still very yellow. So what you need to do is just make sure that your temperature is right. Now remember that in order to add yellow, you need to actually add blue and vice versa, because the raw image is still in negative format. So obviously this image is quite yellow, so to remove yellow, I'm going to add yellow, okay? There we go. And just change the tint a little bit, okay? You can try using your white balance selector here, but again, I don't find that that's very reliable. I'd rather do it sort of manually. Okay, so once you're happy with your colour, you come here down to exposure. This obviously needs some contrast adding. I don't mind the fact that the original negative was quite flat. I'm happy to work with a flat image. Okay, you can use obviously your highlights is your shadow detail, and your blacks are the highlights, or we're working in opposites again here. Now that I've brightened it a bit, I might just tweak the colour again. Now I might add a tiny bit of texture, not too much. Clarity, I'm going to leave that. Dehaze, I suppose a dehaze would work if you're using a negative that's very old and faded. I don't really need it too much here. Just sort of leave it like that. And then I'm going to sort of boost the vibrancy and the saturation. So I'm kind of happy with that. Like I said, this was taken in a small town in Honduras. If you really need to, you can go into your HSL menu and maybe play around here with the oranges, okay, or the purples. But I'm trying not to mess around too much with that sort of stuff. This is only what I would do is if the colours are really way out. Okay, so once I'm happy with those settings, I could actually even crop into this image because I know that the frame hasn't moved, so I'm just going to crop in a little bit. Once I'm happy with that as a sort of general setting, what you need to do next is you need to make a preset. So what you need to do is go to your presets menu, which is here. Click on the little bars on the top right, and you need to save that setting. Okay, check all. Okay, make sure to have everything checked, and you need to save it. So I'm going to call it Honduras. It will automatically save it in the right location, which is in the user presets under camera raw. Okay, you save that. Okay, then you'll see that it's added it here under user presets, which are in alphabetical order. You can see that there's some here which I made previously. These are some that I was playing around with before, but the one that I'm interested in now is the one called Honduras, which is here. And then when you find that, right click and you must make it a favorite. So add it to favorites, and when you've added it to favorites, you'll see it has a little star here. Now that's really important, and I'll explain why now, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this alone. Okay, and you'll see here in Bridge that it's already updated the image, and that looks exactly as it should. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select the rest of the shots, okay, that I want to process in exactly the same way. Okay, let's go through the images. A few more. And then hopefully when we apply this preset to those shots, they should all look pretty much like the lay. So I'm going to show you now how to very quickly and easily make all these negative images look like the image which we just edited. So we selected them all there. Now if we just right click, you'll see a menu called Develop Settings. Okay, and you'll see in here we have the Honduras setting which we just created. And these are also underneath here. You can see some other presets which I created earlier. So if I click on the one called Honduras, and just like magic, you're going to see all these images now be converted from negative to positive. So there we go. Alright, now that is the quickest way to get your conversion. Now I'm just going to rotate a couple of these. Rotate that one. Yeah, so there we go. That's the quickest way to do it. And I've just opened up this one in camera raw. So yeah, I'm quite happy with these. Obviously you might want to go through each one and just sort of give it a little bit of a tweak. Not all the images will be absolutely perfect, but like I said before, it's a good starting point to be working from, and all I'm doing now is just like tiny little tweaks to each one. And then the images which I really want to work on, I'll bring them into Photoshop and remove any dust and scratches. You can do that in Bridge. If you've got any sensor spots that you want to remove, if you click here on spot removal, you can just quite easily select an area like that, and when you finish with that, press done. Now that would have saved in the preset, so if there was any sensor spots, that's a quick way to get rid of them. So I'm really happy with these pictures, and yeah, there we go. Some of these are kind of quite badly scratched, so I'm not going to go crazy editing all of them. I quite like the sort of rustic look, and I quite like the sort of edge of the frame look. They almost look like a sort of Instagram filter, which is pretty cool. So I'm really happy with these. And then when you've finished doing that, all you need to do then is process these images, either convert them to JPEGs, so you can easily upload them to your website or to Facebook, or to TIFFs if you want to do more sort of higher end work with them in the future. So these are some images which I've already edited, just shots from my travels. So I'm really quite happy with the quality of these. But that's my work process, and I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you.